Product market fit, when done right, is actually the answer to so many of the things that plague us. In just about every company I've ever had, we have turned acquisition from a variable expense to a consistent profit center.
The following podcast is brought to you by Thryv. Manage, run, and grow your business all from one dashboard using one login. Small business runs better on Thryv.
Hey, this is Gordon Henry at Winning on Main Street. And this week, we're excited to have somebody who has been an Inc. 500 entrepreneur and a consultant to leading entrepreneurs and CEOs, Tim Calise. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Appreciate you having me.
Great to have you here. So quick bio on Tim. He's a serial entrepreneur, husband and father, avid Formula One fan. Most of all, knows how to scale a business. He's done it in many different businesses with 6 business exits. Today, he's a business coach, investor, advisor to over 15 privately held businesses with annual revenues from $250K to $10 million and more. In many ways, Tim says he was destined to be an entrepreneur from an early age, always looking for a different way to do just about everything. What should you, our listeners, get out of this episode? Whether you're just starting out or well on your way to success, Tim has really kind of done it all in the small business world and can inform your journey. And you may just want to try to hire him. So, Tim, super excited to meet you. Let's dive in. Can you walk us through your career journey and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Absolutely. And as you noted in that very kind intro, my journey started early on in my childhood. So I was, to the great chagrin of my 2 sisters, the kid in middle school who brought a briefcase to school. So I was definitely the cool kid, as you can probably imagine. But really, it primarily started in college for me. I always knew I liked numbers. I liked finance. My dad was in professional services. But I also knew that I was not destined to be a small cog in a big wheel. My kind of entrepreneurial mind, I think, had been formed at that point. And I liked the idea of using my art in a traditional sense of taking problems and figuring out innovative solutions. And so my first primary company was in college. It was a late night snack delivery business in the Washington, D.C. area. And then after that, I created a textbook exchange program. So as a college kid, solved some problems that were right there in front of me. And then I stepped out into the finance world and started an investment company in my early 20s that had some great success. We were able to raise over $325 million between the age of 22 and 25. And then actually voluntarily gave all that money back before the 2008 market crash. Took a leave from finance, got into technology and fitness, and put my own money where my mouth was, and started to learn the principles of doing things on your own and scaling a team and all the things that come with being a small business owner. And then through that gym experience, that fitness experience, I was introduced to a couple, Alex and Layla Hormozi, who started a company called GymLaunch, which some folks might be familiar with. And I came on and joined Alex as his partner and member of the executive team at GymLaunch and our sister companies through the sale about 2 years ago to a private equity firm. So have kind of done small business, done it on my own, built teams, raised capital. And so I think I'm a little bit of a Swiss Army knife in that regard, but I have such a soft spot for the entrepreneurial journey that I've dedicated the last 2 years in trying to help kind of battle entrepreneurial isolation, if you will, as a number 2 and a guide and advisor and investor to the next round of entrepreneurs.
Wow, fascinating journey. And, with all your varied success, I can't help but ask you, is there a formula for running a small business successfully? And I ask you that because you've done it in a lot of different ways, a lot of different places. And so you're not specifically in a category. It's not like you've just done it in one industry. So many people think, well, I'm in this vertical or I'm in this category. You've kind of done it in many. So is there a general success formula that you can share for small businesses?
Yeah, so a great mentor of mine, a gentleman named Alex Sharfin, came up with a concept called the 5 core functions of a business. And I think intuitively, We all know these things, but I think he laid it out in a great way. And so the five are effectively lead generation, lead nurturing, sales or conversion, product delivery, and then resale and ascension or retention on the back end. And I think that's really important because it allows us effectively a framework in which we can look at the business and its component parts to understand where the opportunities are. Where are those levers that we can pull to hopefully be able to move the business forward in the greatest extent possible with every unit of either capital, money, time, et cetera. And I mention that simply because I think the formula that I have found is number one, understanding each of those component parts and having your finger on the pulse so you understand kind of where those opportunities are. And the second is, I think one of the reasons why I have been able to do the various things that I've done is I'm not afraid of taking the small losses. And I think this theme comes out a lot. The number one thing that I would recommend to any small business owner, especially under even $1 million in revenue, there's only one metric that really matters, and it's the number of offers that you make. I think we get wrapped up in like, what about paid ads? Should I be doing podcasting? What about the product? What about acquisition? The only thing that matters in the beginning is to bridge the gap between where you are and where your customers are and where they want to go. And by making offers, it will inform every part of those five core functions, what's working and what's not. And it'll allow you to be able to be iterative in your development. And so number of offers made, I think, is the number one thing that I would recommend to anyone, especially starting out.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about your consulting business. So you get hired by entrepreneurs, CEOs to tell them how to do things better, right? Can you give us a couple of examples of where you've been hired recently or where you're working now, and kind of what were the changes that you came in and implemented?
Yeah. So I see myself in have found that I'm a product first kind of entrepreneur and innovator. And what I mean by that is I believe, especially in the early stages, that product is the thing that matters most. And so by taking a product approach, I'll give you a couple of examples. So one is a gentleman who owns a non-medical home services business. Seems as far away from kind of e-commerce and brick and mortar service and things like that as you can probably get. But fundamentally, what they have is a core service, and he had one level of service. So we came in and said, okay, let's actually look at your customer base because not all customers are the same. And so let's create the different personas of your current buyers. And from that, we can better understand how we can build products or tweak our product mix and our stack to better align with each of their needs, expectations, objections, things like that. And so one of the things that I do almost across the board is to understand how we can use product to both be an acquisition tool. I believe in demonstrating or documenting over kind of creation in marketing sense, and then using the product to actually lead the acquisition process. So that's one. I have a gentleman who's in the podcasting space. He helps small podcast hosts and host platforms in getting their content out. So creating audiograms and assets that they can use for distribution and using some technology around that. And one of the things that we worked on with him was he was positioned as having these great, called a tool, but he wasn't providing a service. And I think we struggle sometimes in kind of bridging that gap. That's like selling features versus benefits. And so I've helped him better position himself in a very competitive industry, competing against the ChatGPTs of the world and all the other, tools that are out there, in how can we actually create a long-term, sustainable, sticky process around the same kind of core ideas.
Right. Yeah, really interesting. And
yeah.
I think you've said somewhere on your website that you were often the silent number two, you said, behind talented CEOs, that you weren't always the number one guy.
Yeah.
What's the difference in the skill set, do you think, between the number one and the number two? And, for people who are listening, some may be number one, some may be number two or three. What should they do to complement themselves?
Yeah. So I have always likened myself as being a strong number two. And what that means for me is I personally believe that most entrepreneurs will thrive in a co-collaborative environment. How many of us have probably sat behind a computer trying to figure things out, tweak a model, do more research, reading, and when you're stuck in that vacuum, it can be very difficult to kind of get the creative juices flowing. And how many times have we probably been sitting there going, I really wish I had someone I could talk to, bounce ideas off of, and things like that. And unfortunately, for entrepreneurs, we look to our friends and our family as kind of primary kind of targets in that respect, but they generally don't understand the way our minds work and what we're trying to do, and so they do their best. But I've fundamentally found myself in a position of being that co-collaborative partner, and so I can both take what a CEO or a founder is thinking. I can kind of run it through my lens and say, I see where you're going. What about this? And then when we go to execution, especially in the smaller, at the smaller end of the revenue range, I can help package that into kind of an executing plan. And so I kind of sit in between the creative juices of a founder entrepreneur and turning that into an actionable a plan that can then go down to the teams and then be implemented thereafter.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, in your consulting business, you say you help entrepreneurs avoid 6-figure and 8-figure mistakes.
Yeah.
So those are big mistakes. What are the kinds of mistakes that you've seen entrepreneurs make or tend to make, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one that I see is, again, getting back to kind of this product-led approach, is thinking that they can outmarket a bad product. Product market fit, when done right, is actually the answer to so many of the things that plague us. Think about brand. Like he who has a bigger brand will generally win. Well, how do you build a sustainable, valuable brand? You're known for something out in the marketplace that is different, that is differentiated from everyone else. Well, how do you do that? And you can kind of see each step we go that by having an innovative and unique way to look at the product and positioning, we can actually create a better brand, better acquisition systems. In just about every company I've ever had, we have turned acquisition from a variable expense to a consistent profit center. And at GymLaunch, the example of that was we helped gym owners acquire customers at a profit. We introduced the 6-week transformation challenge at $600. The rest of the industry at the time thought we were crazy because they were giving away free trials. So at first blush, you would say, how does $600 compare to free? It just doesn't make any sense. And instead we said, you know what? We're going to charge the most when the pain is the highest. And by charging more in an industry that is known for failure cycles, by charging more, we can put a better product on the field. And the better the product is, the better the success rate is. The better the success rate is, the more rabid fans we will have, and therefore our acquisition process will only get easier. Even if you want to run paid ads, I mean, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all kind of at the cash flow statement effectively. If you want to run paid ads, there's a cost to it. How quickly can you recoup that cost? The faster we can get our money back, the faster we can redeploy it, and that cycle therefore continues. And so we do everything we can to build a product mix from the front end all the way through kind of ascension to attract and retain all the various different avatars that we might be going after.
How is it that you can go into the business and just spot what's wrong? I mean, we've all watched Shark Tank or seen Marcus Lemonis with the Prophet. He goes in and he shakes his head and he says, you guys are doing it all wrong. Yeah. Like, there's a certain skill you have to being able. Do you have a process where you go in and you say, okay, I'm going to look at the value chain or something? How do you do that as a consultant?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, I have a process around it. I think it looks like it's sometimes gut feel, but very much so. Again, being cash is king, especially early on, I look at using that product as how are we attracting people? What does it look like? And a basic framework here is, I think many times we try to market to cold traffic, to the outside world. And try to very quickly convert them from not knowing anything about us. And at that point, they are problem and solution unaware. They might not even know what they don't know. And they don't know how to address the thing that is plaguing them kind of deep inside, but they don't even know kind of what questions to ask. We try to accelerate that process to say, take them from that point to, I want to sell them a high ticket program that might be 12 months long. And you can almost see it's almost too big of a leap. So the question is, how do we put the building blocks in place where each one of the steps of acquisition allows us to both inform and create a rabid fan early on, but we can do it at a profit typically. So the 3-step framework that I would use is, you create kind of a lead, and that could be a lead you can attract them with like lead magnets, a free giveaway, something like that. Then we take a lead who has expressed interest in who we are and what we do. We then create a customer from them, and a customer is defined as someone who has spent $1 or more with us. And then you can create a client. A client is someone who has gone through the optimization, call it the sorting process, and has now kind of been placed inside of our ecosystem in the right way, shape, form, revenue level, price level, et cetera, to solve the thing that they came to us for. And I think by doing that, and the framework works because it allows us to compartmentalize each of those steps, look at them objectively. How do we build process in here? How do we build profit in here? And then how do we create systems and SOPs to be able to take somebody through that whole journey, which at the end of the day, for small business owners like us, we need to take advantage of every leveraged opportunity that we can. So how do we build systems? What is the platform that we're working with? How does that help us reduce headcount but increase efficiency? Mm-hmm. And the more linear we can make it, the more repeatable you can make it. You mentioned Marcus Lemonis. I remember there was I think they did like custom like camper vans, I think was the process. And he came in and said, Red company was doing $2 million a year or something like that, but really wasn't making any money. And the first question he asked was, so do you have standard layouts or is everything custom? And they said, yeah, 90% of our work is custom. He's like, well, no wonder because you can't build any momentum. Yeah. You can't build repeatability through your process. So everything it sounds good on paper. You can sell high ticket, right, but it's all very high cost. So I think the more repeatable we can make the process, the better off we'll be. And we can get that flywheel going as a small business owner.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Put you on the spot. You're consulting. You're obviously a very successful consultant. What do you charge, or how do you charge? Do you charge a percentage, or do you take stock in the company? Like how do you do it?
Yeah, so great. I eat my own cooking. So the meta thing about this is I follow the exact same framework I just laid out a minute ago. So my first tier is I have something called the co-creator community, which is a $250 a week, no contract, no obligation, stay as long as you'd like. But if you leave, you can't come back for a year. And that is a group of small business owners and entrepreneurs. We meet once a week for an hour. And every other week, we either do a workshop, like we'll actually work together, or we'll do some kind of training. And that's based on what I'm seeing with my clients and some of the mentors that I work with. So that's, call it step one. That is the first entry point, and a great way for people to kind of get into the world and start to see what that's like. After that, I do consulting in 3 ways. There's kind of revenue share, there's cash, and there's stock. And then the last kind of step from there is for those that I consult with. In many times, I've actually been brought on as a kind of a partner or an investor for primarily equity and a board seat or something like that. So those are the 3 kind of stages that I just like I mentioned and recommended for folks here. I follow the exact same process, and it's worked very, very well so far. Yeah,
terrific. I hope some of our listeners will reach out to you. And at the end, I want to make sure we give them the place to go, the location on the web. You raised a lot of money. I mentioned at the beginning, I think you raised something like over $600 million. You mentioned early on in your career you did that. What are some of the things people should be thinking about? I'm starting a business, or I'm trying to scale my business. I know I need money to do it. How do I begin that process? What should I be thinking about?
Yeah, so I'll answer it in 2 ways. So the first is if you are thinking, I can't move the business forward because I need to raise money, I want to give you a little bit of a different way to think about it. I've worked in a number of software businesses, and I know, Gord, you're in that world as well. So many times we say, I need to raise, $1 million, $2 million to build my MVP, my minimum viable product. But imagine a world where you said, okay, I'm trying to figure out how I can build something that does this specific thing. Can you do it manually? Can you do it in Excel? What other ways can you at least validate the idea to a potential ideal customer of yours simply for no other reason than to learn and to have the confidence that there's a ready, willing, and able buyer when you raise the capital and build the thing? So in just about every company that I now work with, especially startups, we will always sell before we create.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would challenge you to think of what is a way to at least deliver part of what you're trying to do at a very, very low or no cost immediately. But let's say you do need to raise capital. Number one, not all investors are the same. So you have to know what type of investor do you want? Do you want a purely financial investor? And that comes in a few different forms. Or do you want what's called kind of a strategic investor, a strategic partner, someone who can bring not only capital, but also guidance, right? The earlier on you are, and the more risk there is, the more of the company you're going to give up. So I try to encourage folks, even if you do need to raise money, to at least get some indications of traction, of product market fit before you go and actually raise capital, because that extra little step is there's a lot of risk in there. And the more risk that's on the table, the more you're going to give up, a percentage of the company you're going to give up ultimately. So those are kind of the two things I would think about. You mentioned kind of the capital we were able to raise. I raised, over $300 million. And the reason why I was able to do that is because I knew what our unique selling proposition was. And for those that were around in kind of the 2004 to 2008 timeframe, this is when hedge funds were getting really hot, and hedge fund managers were saying, you should be lucky to be able to invest with me. And they had this false bravado that someone new to the industry, I just didn't quite understand. And so this sounds kind of basic, but this is what I did. I went out and said, we're small. The big guys aren't going to give us money. Institutions, universities, that's all out. That's maybe sometime down the road. I'm going to be getting money from mom and pop investors. Number one. And number two, most of it was like retirement accounts. So I simply went out, Gordon, and said two things. Number one, I greatly appreciate the trust that you put in me. I do not take my fiduciary duty lightly, and you will never have to wonder whether your money is safe. That was number one. And number two was, I'm going to be hyper communicative. I'm going to send out weekly emails. Here's my number. Whatever you need, I am here to help you. And that got us from $1 million to over $50 million, 250, 500,000, $1 million at a time. And then we were able to go to institutions. And so, as with most things, compounding is a real thing. Nonlinear growth is something that we saw happen in that business as well. So, but you have to start somewhere.
So it sounds like everything has gone well for you, that you've had success after success after success. Have you had any failures?
Oh, absolutely. This is my favorite subject because I think you picked up on it exactly right. It sounds like it's just been home run after home run after home run. The scars that I have, having gone through this process, are plentiful. And the times where I have led myself astray is when I haven't adhered to the things that I've mentioned a couple of minutes ago. I had an idea that I loved, that I sold to myself, and then there wasn't actually a market for it. I've done that. With our fitness business, we started with one location and we got it to be slightly profitable. And I was like, all right, I got this thing nailed. Let's go open another one and another one and another one. And at that point, I was basically in my late 20s. My ego drove me at that time. I wanted to be known as the guy who had the most number of units in this system that I was building. And it was like, I just should have stuck with one. And at some point I realized that I was out over my skis We had to shut some of those clubs down. We had to retreat to a position of strength. And the more clubs we opened, the less money we made. And it looked like I had the world in my, at my fingertips, and it was just terrible. And the point when I knew that I had lost my way was I had a general manager who came to me one day and effectively quit on the spot and said, I can't do this anymore in no uncertain terms. And then half my team quit after that. And my first indication was anger. It was like, how can they do this to me? I've treated them well. Don't you know that I've funded payroll out of my pocket? And after about a day and a half, it was like, I am the sinking ship that they're jumping, that they are saving themselves from. And it was such a painful lesson, but it showed me that I was not the guy. I didn't have the belief system and the traits and the characteristics to do what it is that I was trying to do. And those things are reconciled one way or the other. And so I would just encourage anybody out there that you can be motivated, but make sure you're pragmatic in what you're doing. And I should have hired a mentor earlier in my career. I think I was so blinded to the idea that I could figure anything out. And I think in school, I was, the smartest kid wins, that kind of thing. And then that turned into he who or she who can withstand the most pressure and hold the mantle will win. And now, after 20 years, I now realize a lot of those premises were wrong. And so, yeah, my own bravado was probably cost me more money than anything else along the way.
You had an interesting phrase in there when you were just recounting that. You said, I should have hired a mentor. How do you hire a mentor?
So right now I have two. One of them took a home services business, actually in the real estate industry, from $100 million in revenue and to $3.4 billion in 6 years, excuse me, and exited. And then the other one, who's actually a kind of a in the coaching consulting space, but I'm a dad of three, just to be frank, and I have done the burn the candle at both ends, and I am building a life now where I can live my life and be able to have financial stability. And he has probably sold $150 million worth of product, but he's one of these guys who has figured out how to work 10 hours a week and do it on a leverage basis. And so he and I have been working together because I'm trying to really crack into that. I'm good at high horsepower, just add more, do more. Right. And I'm really trying to be cognizant of he cracked the code for me, or showed me the possibility of what it is like to build a very leveraged service business. It doesn't have to be done in the blood, sweat, and tears, red ocean competition kind of way. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to ask you, we just have a little time left. Today, I suppose, like most times, there's lots of economic volatility out there. Somebody's trying to run a business and they're saying, my God, I can't hire anybody. Labor is so tight. If I hire them, it's hard to find good people. Yeah. Interest rates are high. Inflation is high. It's impossible to run a business. What's your view on sort of economic trends and, kind of, is it a good time or a bad time at any particular time? Yeah. Because it always seems like there's something going wrong out there in the economy.
Yeah. And I think that last part is exactly right, which is there is no kind of fair weather time where it's just going to feel like, oh, the world is going to be fine. I see, blue skies. Now is the time to put on risk. And I use that phrasing purposefully, which is I look at it simply as, and I do this on a quarterly basis, just a little kind of check-in on, do I want to be putting risk on or taking risk off right now? Right now, I'm kind of in the middle. I think, we actually even saw, inflation came in slightly below expectations this morning. Stock market, as of the last time I looked at it, was running pretty strongly. But I think some of those issues, it's less about kind of enterprise value, like M&A, mergers and acquisitions and IPOs and raising capital. That's really affected by a lot of those factors. When we're building a small business, I care more about the health of the consumer rather than the health of kind of the larger financial markets, because that's really what I'm levered to. And I try to find things, I try to solve problems that are always going to be there. They're kind
Yeah.
of omnipresent.
Yeah.
I don't chase. I kind of chase momentum before. It's just not what I do right now.
Hmm.
Now, if you were trying to build an AI product or something like that, lots of competition. Got to strike while the iron's hot. Early movers probably matter. But I wouldn't be, taking out a second mortgage on my house. I would try to figure out other ways to do that. So the long and short of it, I try to just look at the health of the consumer and continue to put a product on the field that will win even when budgets are tighter than it might be otherwise.
Yeah, great answer. Tim, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in 30 seconds with more from Tim Calise. Don't go anywhere.
This episode of Winning on Main Street is brought to you by Thryv, the small business management platform that you and your customers will love, no matter where you are. Thryv helps you run your business, keep organized, and get paid faster, all from one login and dashboard. Thryv makes it easy for customers to find you online, instantly interact, and stay engaged. And with free unlimited support 24/7, there really is no comparison. Go to thryv.com/pod for a quick demo to see everything Thryv can do.
We're back with Tim Calise. Really fascinating conversation with a person who's been an entrepreneur, a coach, an investor, a hedge fund guy. I mean, kind of done it all. Incredible. Tim, you were just talking about small businesses and this idea of, let's just find something that people need that's not dependent on, trends so much. So many of these small businesses do provide something, painting houses or, doing driveways or trimming trees, stuff that people always need. But they find it difficult to scale. So many small businesses, you find the boss and maybe they got like one person under that, and they just can't sort of ever grow it to the point where they have kind of a bigger thing. If you're talking right now, let's say to somebody who's a roofer, an electrician, a plumber, and they're just like the boss and one or two helpers, how does that person get to be a big business?
It's so interesting that we're talking about this because actually, one of the companies I'm associated with, we just ran the largest or second largest roofing and solar convention in the country. I just got back a couple of days ago from organizing and helping pull off that event. So I know roofing very, very well and home service. And so there's kind of two ways you can do it. So one is, let's take roofing, for example. By and large, it's a once in every 20-year buying cycle effectively. So the question is, when the number one thing that matters is the acquisition of the customer, it's the hardest part of the whole thing. And you can only monetize that relationship once every 20 years. It gets really, really difficult really fast to scale that business. And was talking to somebody in the marketing, kind of digital marketing sphere, and they echoed something very similar, getting quality leads and things like that. So the first thing I would do is to challenge the idea of how do we smooth out the revenue curve for that provider? And there's kind of two ways you can do it. So one is the old, the idea of like service contracts or other things that you can do. That's kind of one way that you can go. And then the second, which I think is very interesting, is what other services does that person need? And how can you either provide them in-house or through some kind of joint venture? And so the example I would give you is I bought my house about 5 years ago. I was referred to a painter. We wanted to repaint our house before I moved in. And he said, well, not only can I do the painting, I can also do plumbing and I can do HVAC. And I know he didn't do all of that because I've seen his trucks, but what he figured out is he built a little consortium of when one of us gets a customer, we all get a customer. And I think that model is very, very interesting because if you think of all the entry points that person has and you can have a shared value proposition, you almost build a competitive moat around yourselves. And so I would think in those terms as both kind of depth of product and service and also breadth of product and service, mostly through kind of some kind of joint venture or consortium agreement with other people in your area.
Yeah, that's super interesting example. And I find the same thing. I'm a homeowner and we bought this house a few years ago. And I find one of the most surprising things is that the person who did the service on the house before never follows up with me to say, hey, can we come back?
Yeah.
Like we're starting to have some problems with our roof. I don't know the person who put on the roof originally, and they're not calling me up, so I'm going to find somebody else.
Right.
I think that retention effort of just try to stay in touch with your customers or approach people, it surprisingly seems to be very difficult for small businesses, that they kind of do it once and forget to ever stay in touch. Bigger businesses, I think, are very good at it. Once you're on Amazon, they're always pinging you with reasons to come back. Not so much small businesses.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is so Alex Ramosi, my partner, used to say, advanced people never don't do the basics. So I think you're exactly right. The reason why big businesses are big businesses is not because they can necessarily throw their weight around. It's because they don't lose sight of those kind of core pieces. So I would absolutely agree. And going back to that kind of 5 core functions, the second one is lead nurture.
Yeah.
It is virtually impossible or impractical to say that someone is going to go from cold to being a buyer in one step all at the right time. And just the numbers don't just bear out that that's not the case. But even staying in front of your customers, having a system, our CRM is a great example of that.
Yep.
How do we have, we used to call it data warehousing, but like one source of truth is what we used to call it. So the CRM usually acts as the hub, and then you can build the spokes from there. Get everybody in one place, run an automation. I mean, we're in a world right now. I mean, this stuff is low-hanging fruit. Find out their birthday, found out the day that they bought the house, whatever it might be, put it in the CRM, put it on an anniversary thing, and send them a note. You can even do this now automated. They'll do handwritten notes out. I think so often we're trying to look over the horizon, call it a silver bullet, call it the big win, whatever it might be. Don't lose sight of that day-to-day blocking and tackling, because it might not be sexy, but it's very successful by doing those things. So I think you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And now we have no reason and no excuse, I would even say, not to do those things, because we have so many tools available to us to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tim, we're just about out of time. What's next for you? Where's your next few years going to be? What do you see on the horizon for you personally?
Yeah, I love working with entrepreneurs as that kind of number 2 and co-creator. So my vision for myself is I want to create a pool. My vision is I want to help influence $100 million a year in revenue. So I am building a universe around me with people who, I put out something called my intention statement about 6 months ago, which was I wrote in 3 pages where I was, where I am, where I'm going, what I'm willing to accept, and what I'm not willing to accept in my life, personally and professionally. And I put that out as the number 1 thing that actually I send to prospects, because I want to make sure our visions are aligned, our traits, our values are aligned before we take a step forward in working together. That, call it putting it out in the universe or whatever it might be, it has fundamentally changed the trajectory of my business, because if you have certain beliefs that don't align, we're not a fit. But it has attracted people who say, you know what, I watched your video, I heard you on this podcast, I just like the way you think, I think you could be helpful. Even just before this recording, I was on with a private equity firm who said, you've got the kind of weird Venn diagram of skill sets and experience that a company that we have an investment in needs. Would you come on as an advisor? We'll pay you in some equity and give you a retention, a little bit of retention option. And I love those opportunities. So my next step is to find, and if you're listening to this, to find folks who I can bring my network, bring my experience, bring the way I see the world, to be able to help accelerate growth in a completely value-add performance basis.
Awesome. Well, I could ask you questions all day. You've got an incredibly original point of view, but unfortunately we're out of time. I know people can hear you. What is the name of your podcast, and where can they find you?
So my podcast is called Leveling the Field, but the best place to find me is either on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. I'm on all 3. And I do monitor my own DM. So if anything resonated with you, feel free to reach out on any of those platforms. You can DM me the word Gordon, Gordon, and I will send you a special gift for being a listener and supporter of the podcast.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Tim, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great, and I hope people will get in touch with you.
I appreciate it, Gordon. Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to thank our producer, Tim Alima, and coordinators, DeEtte Barnett and Daniel Huddleston. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your colleagues, friends, and family to subscribe, and please leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us in the rankings. Small business runs better on Thryv. Get a free demo at thryv.com/pod, and check out our new free product, Command Center, at thryv.com. Until next time, make it a great week.